Hi, it's Crystal King, and I am the author of Feast of Sorrow and The Chef's Secret, and I am going to tell you all about this book, which comes out on Tuesday, February 12th, next week. And so me and Mr. Merle, my little fluffy buddy, are gonna hang out with you. Maybe Nero will grace us with his presence. We'll find out. But in the meantime, I just wanted to give you kind of a heads up on what this book is all about. This is my second novel. It's also about food. My first novel was Feast of Sorrow, and it was about an ancient Roman gourmand, a guy named Apicius. And this particular book is about a Renaissance chef, a man named Bartolomeo Scappi. And Bartolomeo Scappi was a celebrated chef that released a cookbook in 1570 in Italy, and this is actually the only English translation of the cookbook. This is called L'Opera di Bartolomeo Scappi, and it is a book that's filled with thousands of recipes, and they include some of the really interesting dishes that we know today in Italian cuisine, like some of the first pastas. There's a whole bunch of crostatas, really wonderful, all sorts of just interesting and delicious dishes that I know that you might love today as well. But what's really cool about this cookbook, which you can see is a little bit dog-eared and lots of post-its in here. And this translation, by the way, is by Terence Scully, who's a food historian out of the UK. There's all these woodcuts in this particular cookbook. This cookbook, when it came out, it differed quite a bit. I'm going to show you some of the woodcuts in a second. But this cookbook was really different than other manuals of cooking that had come out previously in the years before that. There were other types of cookbooks, but a lot of those cookbooks actually just regenerated recipes. They would just share the recipes that they learned in other places. The concept of creating a book with original recipes that you didn't copy from someone else just wasn't the case. And so that when Bartolomeo Scappi came out with his works, L'Opera di Bartolomeo Scappi means the works of Bartolomeo Scappi, he wanted all the recipes to be original. The cookbook was created for his nephew, Giovanni, who was also his apprentice. And the cool thing is that I made Giovanni a character in The Chef's Secret as well. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about Chef's Secret in a bit, but I want to tell you a tiny bit more about the cookbook. So there's all of these really fantastic woodcuts in here, if I can find them, that show you what a papal kitchen might have been like, for example. And so this is, you can see kind of what it would have looked like, the way they would have worked. This is probably a more ideal representation of what the kitchen might have looked like versus what it actually looked like. But you can see, like, this is how you would take your meals on the road if you had to follow an Italian prince from one city to the other, or a pope, for example. In this cookbook is also the very, if I can find it, I might not be able to find it. There's a lot of woodcuts in here, as you can see. In this cookbook is also the first depiction of a fork in any sort of book or manual or literature. Forks were something that had been around for much longer, but the first time it was seen in print, it was in this book. There's also some of the first recipes for turkey, and there are... I could talk about this cookbook all day, but I want to talk about the book that I wrote that was inspired by that cookbook. So The Chef's Secret, which comes out February 12th, it is a book about the life of Bartolomeo Scappi, of which we just don't know much about it. He was somebody that was born roughly in the early 1500s, and he was born in the town of Dumenza, which is a little town on the coast of the Swiss Italian border. He lived in a variety of locations during his life, and we know that because he speaks of the foods of different regions in a way that you probably would have needed to live there and cook there. So we are fairly certain that he probably lived in Milan, in Venice, and potentially spent some time in Bologna. And he might have lived in Florence, we don't know. And he certainly lived in Rome, working for several different cardinals and popes. We also know that he had his nephew, Giovanni, which he wrote and dedicated the cookbook to. There was a steward in the papal kitchens who was friends with Giovanni as well and became very close friends with Scappi, this man Francesco Rianoso, who he has also dedicated the cookbook to. And we know that he had a sister named Caterina who was named in his will, and he left her some jewels. Not much, but a decent amount for somebody in a will. And we really don't know much more about him, to be honest. And so Merle wants to be the star of this show. And how could he not be? Look how gorgeous he is. He's a rag doll, in case you're wondering. And so Bartolomeo Scappi, since we don't know much about his life, I thought, well, what was his life like? What could have happened in it? And of course, I thought, what if he fell in love with someone he shouldn't have? And what would be the worst that could happen if he fell in love with someone that he shouldn't have? And there's lots of books about them somebody falling in love with someone they shouldn't have, and then it doesn't work out for whatever reason, and all sorts of things, In the books that I could think about, usually that never turns out well. And I thought, well, what if Scappi had a love affair for most of his life with a woman? And so the book begins on his deathbed. And so this is not a surprise because you find out very quickly. And his nephew Giovanni is there mourning his uncle, and he discovers that his uncle has given him the keys to a strongbox, which has all these journals and letters in them, and they're in code. And code was something that was very in vogue, actually, during this time frame. People were really interested in secret codes and creating them and keeping messages secret. They didn't have encryption like we do today. It was a little bit more manual. So Giovanni finds these journals and letters and discovers that Scappi had indeed had a secret love affair with a woman. And so that's what the book is about. Basically, it's this backwards and forwards. You're going backwards, learning the life of Bartolomeo Scappi, and you're going forwards in Giovanni's life as he's uncovering the layers of the things that occurred in Bartolomeo's life. It was super fantastic fun to write, and it's full of food. I take, because we don't know a lot about certain pieces of it, I take a whole bunch of liberties. For example, with, we don't want cat butt in the video. Help me out here. Since we don't know a lot, I got to make a few things up. And one cool thing that I got to make up was how Michelangelo might have figured into the book. So Scappi was somebody who was working in the papal kitchens at the time that Michelangelo was painting the altar for the Sistine Chapel. And I thought, well, of course, he probably ate Scappi's food at some point, or maybe some of the food from the kitchens, or he was certainly probably familiar. They were probably familiar with each other. Scappi had made a name for himself at this point. And I thought, what if this master sugar sculptor, Bartolomeo Scappi, worked with this master sculptor and painter on a banquet for Charles V. And so that was a super fun scene to do. I met the author Stephanie Story around the time that I had been putting this scene in, and she wrote the book Oil and Marble, which is all about Michelangelo and Raphael and their rivalry during the couple of months that they lived together in Florence. And so I was asking her what she thought about this sculptor idea, and she loved it, which just was awesome to hear. And because it's something that I think I try to stay true to the slightly curmudgeonly character of Michelangelo and what would have made him be interested in collaborating with Scappi. So that's a little tidbit you're gonna have to dig into in the book. There's tons of food and lots of banquets, including a banquet that actually did not take place. In the cookbook, there's many menus that Scappi left behind for Giovanni to be able to model his banquets on. And one of them is a banquet for the anniversary of the coronation of Pius V. And Pius V was a cardinal who was very pious, and he also didn't eat much. Like, he didn't want the sumptuous foods and the luxurious banquets and the crazy amounts of preparation. And so, although that was standard, and Scappi was preparing this amazing banquet for Pope Pius's anniversary, which was something that they would do every year when a pope was for their coronation. When Pope Pius got wind of it, he canceled it. And Scappi, very interestingly enough, included the menu in the cookbook regardless, probably because he had spent so much time and energy and money on it. And so I included a scene about that in the cookbook as well. I mean, in the book as well. This would be a super fun book for a dinner party, and being able to cook some of the Renaissance recipes that took place. If you want to get really crazy and try out the recipes in the cookbook that Bartolomeo Scappi left behind, you can buy it online probably at this point. I wouldn't say you'd be able to find it in most bookstores, but you can certainly find it on online retailers. And there is the Italian version. I did get the luxury of seeing an actual copy of it at the Morgan Library in New York City, which was a total treat, being able to see that in real time. Oh wait, no, I didn't see that in the Morgan Library. I saw the Trinciante, the manual of carving for the third book I'm doing. I saw that at the Morgan Library, but I saw the Bartolomeo Scappi real book, one of the original copies, actually at the Met in New York City. And both of those books I just named, you actually have to have special permissions to see, which you can seek out from their websites if you're that interested. But you need to have a research purpose. And so that's the chef's secret. What do you think, Merle? Yeah. He says go out, buy it, enjoy it, and tell me what you think. I would love to know what your questions are for me about the book, and if there's any particular if you've read the book, I'd love to know what you think about it. If you have questions for me as an author and things that I could tell you about the world of the Italian Renaissance, I'd be delighted to have that conversation too. And definitely subscribe in the corner. You know how this works on YouTube. Subscribe to see more of my videos. I'll be talking about all sorts of other things relating to the Italian Renaissance in the future, and all sorts of things related to food and writing, and talking with other authors that are doing cool things too. So give us, me and the kitties, who you can hear down here. Don't fight, little guys. Yeah, time to go. Thanks for joining me today.